I'm Ivan Stewart. You know, I've got my reputation from racing off-road, Baja 1000, Baja 500, and I've learned a lot of my racing career. We're here today to teach you some of the things that I've learned in my off-roading career that you can apply directly when you go four-wheeling.
Ivan Stewart was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1945. In 1950, his family moved to San Diego.
A lot of my childhood memories revolve around competitive things of one sort or another.
As a child, he raced everything, from bicycles in the alley to coasters on the hillside. And whatever it was, Ivan had to be first.
I just absolutely hate to lose. I'm probably the worst loser you ever met. And I love winning.
In a competitive family, Ivan's greatest competition came from his older brother, Don.
He is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the hardest worker I've ever known. I've never known anybody that works harder than my brother. And I got a good work ethic from him.
From the third grade, Ivan had a dream, not to race, but to work at a San Diego construction company.
And I really, at that time, felt I really didn't need the college and I didn't need this education everybody was trying to force on me.
Ivan followed his brother into the company straight out of high school, where they continued their rivalry.
We built fences, chain link fences, and it was always a race to see who could be the quickest at stretching the wire, tying the wire, or stretching barbed wire, whatever it was. It was always competitive.
Off-road racing came of age at the same time Ivan did, in the 50s and 60s in Southern California. Whenever he could, Ivan took time to attend these early races.
But in those days, I mean, they were just all dune buggies. They would get a bunch of guys together and set off a smoke bomb and lay out a little course. And they'd go racing.
Off-roading suddenly came under the spotlight in the late 60s when IndyCar and Trans Am driver Pernelli Jones came to Ensenada to race in the Baja 1000. Among the fans who watched the start of the race was Ivan Stewart.
And all the things he was going to get to see, and the adventure that he was going to get to go on that I wasn't going to get to do. And I just knew right then that there had to be a way that I've got to be able to do this.
In 1971, still working construction, Ivan entered his first off-road race in an old dune buggy.
And with just rear brakes, and just kind of just ran around there at a nice competitive rate that wasn't going to break the race car, and ended up finishing third.
By 1973, with a wife, a mortgage, and 3 young sons, the only racing Stewart could afford was as a co-driver for his childhood friend, Bill Renko.
And I really disliked the fact that I was putting myself in a situation where I was riding as a mechanic, and I really didn't consider myself a mechanic nor a co-driver.
3 days before the Ensenada 300, Renko broke his leg and asked Stewart to take over. With Earl Stahl as his co-driver, Ivan roared from the starting line and rolled the car.
The throttle cable broke on the race car, so I ended up taking the throttle and hooking it up quickly with my hand so I could use the throttle with my right hand, I could steer with my left, and I could use the brake, and I could use the clutch, and I could elbow Earl to shift for me. So I'd elbow him to, we were screwed up. I mean, I'd give a gas and have the clutch in, and he'd be in the wrong gear and all these things. But with practice, believe it or not, we won our first race.
Ivan followed up by winning the Class II division of the Baja 300. With 2 victories under his belt, he decided to go racing for good.
But I'll never forget whenever I slammed the door and walked out of that construction company, and I talked to my boss later on and later after I had left, and he knew that I was never coming back.
Now competing full-time, Ivan won 4 major races in 1974, including his first Baja 500.
You have to contend with every element you can imagine as far as sand, dust, silt, cattle, getting lost, nighttime, daytime, fog. A lot of time we have to contend with the tides could be a part of the equation. Anything you can imagine is going to happen, and I've never ever gone a race down there that something didn't happen.
Ivan also captured the Class II Off-Road World Championship, and by 1975, he moved up to the Unlimited class.
To be the most recognized off-road race car driver in the circuit. I mean, that was my long-term goal.
Ivan won the Baja 300, 500, and 1000 in 1975, and he drove these grueling races without a co-driver, earning the first ever Ironman award.
And this was a big trophy, and along with $500 to anybody that could race the Baja 500 or the Baja 1000 solo.
Soon Stewart had so many endurance trophies he was known simply as the Ironman.
You know, something that I probably couldn't get rid of now if I wanted to, and I don't want to.
Ironman Stewart was Driver of the Year 3 times in the 1970s, and as the popularity of off-road racing soared, Ivan became the sport's most visible champion.
Wasn't afraid of the hard work. And you want to go to the gym, and you want to go to the Dale Carnegie classes that I highly recommend.
Stewart continued to win fans and influence patrons into the 80s when Mickey Thompson organized off-road races at outdoor stadiums, complete with bumps, jumps, and man-made obstacles.
I think Mickey Thompson saw the need to bring it back into short course or riverside style racing where the fans could watch and we get better television.
Ivan won back-to-back drivers' championships and 3 of the first 4-team championships in Thompson's Super Truck Series. The more races he won, the more successful off-roading became.
And I sincerely think right now that's one of the reasons that sport utility vehicles are so popular.
By the end of the 1980s, Ivan was testing trucks for Toyota and starring in his own arcade game. And promoting the sport became as much of a competition as the races themselves.
I don't care if it's winning in the race or if it's winning at playing checkers or signing autographs. I want my line, for example, longer. If I'm sitting next to Roger Mears and Parnelli Jones and Walker Evans or whoever it might be, and this has happened a lot of times when we've been at a function doing autographs, and I want people to know that my line is longer. It's just the way I am, right?
Going into his 3rd decade of off-roading, Ivan won 11 major races and 4 drivers' championships in 1990. In 1993, he won the Baja 500, Baja 1000, and Nevada 500, known collectively as the crown jewels of the desert.
If I look back and just think about my success and consistency and championships and races that I've won, I think probably it boils down to just an absolute genuine love for what I do.
Racing against drivers now half his age, Ivan won his 14th Baja 500 in 1997, this time in the trophy truck class.
And a lot of times I'm asked how much longer do I want to compete, and it's typically the same answer, and then as long as I'm competitive. And I still feel very competitive in what we're doing, as long as I still love doing it, which I sincerely do, and as long as the sponsors continue to ask me to come back.
His career is a history of off-road racing, from the dune buggies of the 60s to the trophy trucks of the millennium, and Ivan Stewart has won the race against history. He is the greatest off-road racer of all time.
Have the dream before you can have the dream come true. So I learned that early, and I've been chasing dreams ever since. The big difference between off-road racing and off-roading is the fact that we are actually on a race course, if it be in Mexico or Nevada, wherever it is, racing on a road. Off-roading and four-wheeling is exploring. The way I make my living basically is racing for Toyota, and the fact that our goal is to go as fast as we possibly can across the desert in all sorts of conditions, probably everything you can imagine, from rain, sleet, snow, mud, rock, boulders, sand, at all sorts of different speeds. We're constantly striving for technology and shock absorbers and springs and tires and wheels and brakes and everything that's related to off-road racing. Everything that we learn there is directly related to the sports utility stock vehicle, except slowed way down. I hear a lot of times that people will buy their sports utility vehicle and not necessarily use it because they're afraid that they're going to damage the vehicle. And it's a shame, because it's designed to be used. I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't realize that the front wheels drive on a four-wheel drive, or actually pulling the vehicle along with the rear tires, pushing the vehicle. So virtually you have 4 wheels that are pulling you forward or backing you up in reverse, obviously. So a tremendous amount of traction with four-wheel drive. When I talk about having a feel for the vehicle, which I consider is extremely important for any type of driving, especially four-wheeling or off-road, the impact through the steering is probably the key. If the steering wheel is being jerked out of your hand and you're feeling that impact and jerk through the steering wheel, the odds are that you're putting loads on the suspension that you shouldn't be doing. If, for example, you apply the brake and the steering wheel is chattering as you're applying the brake, and you feel the brake pedal bounce, and the whole vehicle is starting to shudder, and the odds are you've locked the brakes up and you started to slide up to a stop and you're going to damage something. There's no reason to do that. If the dashboard is violently being impacted and your camera is bouncing off the dashboard, that's an indication you're probably driving too fast. If the vehicle is starting to spin and jump and bounce, you probably spin the tires. Let some air pressure down and apply the throttle, and you can drive right away. Getting that feel where you have a nice, quality, comfortable ride, if it be off-road or on-road, that's what you want. We have a term in off-road racing, how fast do you want to go? You know, it equates to money. How high do you want to jump? You know, a stock vehicle, you could, I wouldn't advise jumping it. To be honest, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Slow down. We're not racing. We're just having a good time. I think probably the key issue is letting people know where you're going, general vicinity, where you're going to be.
Make sure you have a detailed map of the area and a compass.
The odds are that anything that will break in my pre-runner could break in my race car.
So bring along a toolkit with wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, jumper cables, tire chains, toe straps, and a good jack.
The farther you go, you need to be aware that you could be out there and get stranded. So, possibly a radio or even a phone.
In case you get stuck, bring flares, a first aid kit, extra food, purified water, warm clothing, blankets, and a high-powered flashlight with spare batteries and bulbs.
And one of the most important things that you have to remember to bring is a low tire pressure gauge. By that I mean one that starts at 0 pounds or starts at 5 pounds and goes up to 100, whatever.
Other things to remember are extra fan belts, hoses and fuses, and most importantly, a fire extinguisher.
Whatever you bring, you've got to tie it down because you're going to be off-road and you don't want it bouncing around the back of the car.
There's several different rating systems that are used throughout the country. The Forest Service has the most standardized one, really throughout the nation. It uses diamonds and different colored shapes. There's 4 basic ratings: easiest, moderate, difficult, and most difficult. Your easiest type roads will generally be graded dirt roads, really no real hazards on them. Moderate roads may be a little narrower, may have a little brush, but generally are passable with any high clearance vehicle, not necessarily 4-wheel drive. When you get into the difficult, 4-wheel drive is usually necessary. There'll be some ruts and some drainage dips, what have you, and then in the most difficult, you're liable to run into rock crawling, perhaps, some stream crossings, steep climbs and declines, those kinds of things. Part of planning any 4-wheel drive trip is calling your local land manager or the land manager for the area that you're going to discuss with them weather patterns and trail conditions and other permits. Can really mess up a trip to come all the way out to find out that the road you wanted to travel was closed, or you needed some permit, have to go back into town to get.
We're here in Southern California out in the sand dunes, and we're trying to show you some of the advantages of having a 4-wheel drive and how much fun you can have out playing in the dunes. What I've learned in my 25 years, and a lot of people don't understand that how important it is that the tire takes up a lot of the shock when you're four-wheeling and exploring. That tire, if you've got the maximum recommended tire pressure, adds a lot of shock through the steering and through the whole suspension. If you'll experiment with the lowest recommended rate, I'm sure you'll find that in sand driving that you can go much easier and drive much freer. Okay, what we're going to do is let the tire pressure down from about 28 pounds in this tire down to about 10 or 12 pounds. As you deflate the tire, you'll notice that it'll bulge on the sides and it gives you a lot bigger footprint. The footprint is the actual part of the tire that hits the ground. The biggest thing is you can see the bulge. We've got a little bit longer tire patch now, and it'll be a lot more pliable and give a lot better ride, and we should get a lot better flotation. And you'll see the RPM will actually fall off, and you're moving along without struggling with the engine is no longer under a lot of power, and you're just kind of floating up there. It's a real comfortable, real smooth feeling. Now let's go out and play in the dunes. You know, I really recommend sand for the novice. I really do. I think it's a great idea to come out and get acquainted with the limitations of what your vehicle will do in four-wheel drive, and we can't go any higher.
So this is the limitations. At the momentum we were carrying, we can't go any higher, so we either need more momentum or less tire pressure or more horsepower. So all we're going to do is just put it in reverse and easily back down the hill. I've had the best luck of backing back down any hills with the vehicle in reverse gear with enough throttle just to keep the front tires rotating at the speed of the vehicle. What I was doing there is kind of feeling out the limitations of this vehicle with this tire pressure. We'll take another run, and I'll go up to the crest of the hill and make a little horseshoe and come back and just have a little fun. Okay, what we've learned is about what momentum it takes to get up the hill. And we'll come back down off camber and just kind of give it a little bit of throttle and seeing what it takes. So I can kind of feel up, go up the side of the hill and then come back down again without getting stuck. You can come off the throttle and just kind of float down the hill. Very little throttle right now, just coasting along. It's like driving a lot on an ocean wave. The only thing you really need to be aware of is that if it got real steeper than this, you could tip the vehicle over. The other is with real low tire pressure, you can knock the tire off the bead. The bead is the part of the wheel that secures the tire to the wheels.
Whenever we're out in the wildlands like this, we need to remember that there are critters that live out here, various kinds of wildlife. If you see wildlife, kind of ease out of the throttle, slow down. It's certainly okay to get out, take a picture if you'd like. Try to leave them alone, give them some space, don't bother them, and they'll usually go on their own way nice and easy, and you won't really bother them at all.
Now that we played a little bit on the side of the dunes, what we call off-camber playing in the sand, we're going to go over and crest some dunes. One of the things I feel it's important that whenever you go out and play in the dunes is to do a survey of the area. I would recommend never going over a dune with any speed and not knowing what's over there because it could be a lot steeper than you think for one. The other one probably is important, if not more, somebody could come in the other ways. Drive around the particular dunes you're going to be in, kind of get an idea of how steep the dunes are on one side. One side will be steeper typically than the other, depending on which way the wind blows. Just bounce off the top, down the other side, which makes it a lot of fun. If you're going to get stuck in sand, the odds are that you're going to do it by applying too much throttle with too much tire pressure, and it's going to dig in. So everybody's gotten stuck. If you're going to come out and play, believe me, you're going to get stuck. So go do it. Have a good time, let the air pressure down, drive away, and learn something.
If you're racing on a closed course, say an oval track or a road course, you know where you're going, you know what to expect. In off-road racing, you don't have any idea oftentimes. You may crash somewhere very remote, and it may be a while before anyone gets to you. The environment may be extremely cold, it may be extremely hot, so you have environmental factors that come into play. It's very difficult for the driver to anticipate what's going to happen and to do anything to protect himself in the car. It's extremely important to be very well restrained within that vehicle because the next minute you may be flipping end over end in the desert someplace.
Now that we've got to get home, if you do have low tire pressure, the vehicle's going to feel real loose and real spongy, so to speak. You can drive on the highway at low speeds till you get to a gas station or someplace where you can increase the pressure in your tires. One of the biggest things that I've seen and heard in the past is I know that when people first come out to utilize their sports utility vehicle, their neighbor has told them that this vehicle or these four-wheel drive vehicles will climb a virtual wall. They won't, believe me, they won't go straight up. But they will climb pretty good. This would definitely not be the place to try and climb a hill. Number one is the ravine here, and you really want to stay away from these. This could cave off for one. The other is, had I gone up another 10 or 20 feet, and I fallen off in this, could have done major damage to the vehicle. It's very difficult to back down, much more difficult than you think. This is the kind of situation a lot of people get themselves into. The vehicle would only go so high. The front wheels were real light because all the weight's on the back wheels. And you start going down the hill too fast, common sense will put more brake on, but that locks the front tires up even more. As I back down, the steering input it doesn't take very little effect because there's no weight on it. So here it actually comes so far around that we could have got ourselves in a real dangerous situation. Now that we've got it here, I'll show you how to get out of this particular spot. The tires are turned the wrong direction, so what we have to do is get in, start the engine up, turn the wheels all the way to the left. What we should do, put it in reverse, low range, back down the hill, being very aware that we have to keep the front wheels rotating to have any sort of steering input. The most important thing is to be in control of the vehicle. The thing we could have avoided getting ourselves into this situation had I turned around, I would have realized when I backed up the hill, the vehicle wouldn't make it over the top of the hill. And it would have been very easy to drive it back down the hill again. We're stopped here on the hill just before we go up. We don't know several things: how steep the hill is, what the capabilities of this vehicle on this particular hill. We don't know how rough it is once we get out of over where we can't see. Can we turn around, or are we going to have to back down this hill? I suggest backing up first and see how high you can make it. Carry a little bit of momentum in the steeper parts. It's a little bit hard to see. You may have to use the rearview mirror once in a while. Common sense, back up slowly. There's no race. The reason we do that is because once we get up there and we can't go any higher backing up, we can drive back down the hill much easier than trying to back down the hill. Once you've done that, you backed up the hill and you realize you can get up there and you come back down. Now you want to go up forward again, make sure it's in four-wheel drive. And I want to show you what it's like whenever you get up the hill in only two-wheel drive and then have to back down the hill, how difficult it can be and what kind of trouble you can get into. And make sure it's in four-wheel drive and also in low range. Ease on the engine, ease on the transmission. The engine turns freer. It's got more torque and more horsepower as it's up in the RPM band. We can always stop and then go into a higher range if it smooths out and take it out of four-wheel drive if we have to. And then as we go up, we want to keep smooth throttle going up. No sense of bottoming the suspension out. Making sure that climbing hills is one of the most difficult, and making sure that you go straight up the hills and straight down the hills, most critical. I can't put enough emphasis on that, how critical that is. Last thing you want to do is slide this off the side of a hill into a canyon and then have to go home and tell your wife that, by the way, that $20,000 vehicle is now in a little ball someplace. The trick to being successful in off-road driving or four-wheeling is the fact of being smooth again. If you're going uphill or downhill or wherever it is, being smooth on the throttle.
It's important to carry with you when you're traveling in the backcountry spare parts and emergency supplies, because things can happen. It's also very important, though, to try to balance those around throughout the vehicle. You want to balance your load out of it the best you can. An accident, what have you, remember all that stuff in the car is going to start flying around, and the last thing you want is a jack or something hitting you in the back of the head.
Rule of thumb is anytime something's bouncing up and down, you're going too fast. I want to pump the throttle and get a little jerky on the suspension here and kind of bounce things and tell you that it's extremely uncomfortable to go just a little bit too fast. As you see how rough it is and uncomfortable on the driver, it's equally rough and very hard on the equipment. So just a half a mile an hour could be a world of difference in ride quality. It's nice and smooth, nice steady throttle, nothing's bottoming, nothing's bouncing off the seat, much more comfortable ride, and it's much easier on the equipment. What we've done is come up the hill and made it up and made a U-turn, and we're heading back down, and we've come to this little arroyo, but I stopped to demonstrate the fact that it's why it's so important to not get into a race or get yourself in a position where you're going faster than what the conditions of your experience allow you. So since I've crossed the arroyo, the right front wheel is on hard ground, and the left rear is obviously off the ground. Had the arroyo been deeper and more dramatic, it could have been very easily to tip the vehicle over. I would come down the hills just on the brake enough just to keep the tires at the same speed of the vehicle. Keep the engine RPM matched with the speed of the vehicle. It's very important to use the lowest gears possible. Low range, low gear, and smooth braking. What you don't want to get into is the situation where you start sliding down the hill or where the tires are locked up and the vehicle now begins to go faster than the tires are rotating. You're not going to have control of the rear of the vehicle, nor you're not going to have any steering. Keeping the tires on the ground as much as you possibly can, and the speed of the vehicle matching the speed of the tires is extremely critical. The most important thing, don't get in a hurry. It's not a race.
One of the reasons there's so much conflict in public land management is because folks really don't try to respect each other. They're trying to do the same thing you are, have a good time. If you're in a situation where you're on a hill and you come across another car, you say you're going down the hill and they're coming up, the car that's trying to come up the hill, of course, has very little ability to be able to stop and back down and what have you. So the rule of thumb is you need to move over and let them go by, or you need to stop and back up so they can continue on. Basically, that's a right-of-way rule in the backcountry.
Extremely important when you first get your sports utility vehicle is knowing where the lowest part of the vehicle is. And typically, on all vehicles, it's going to be the rear differential. So if you're coming down the road here at 20 or 30 miles an hour at a safe speed, you see a rock in the road, we're going to have to straddle this rock. Be aware to put the vehicle's rear end, the lowest point of the vehicle, that rock between that differential and the tire. Don't hit it with the tire or the differential if you can. If you think that you can't maneuver the vehicle safely to move that rock away from the differential, you've got to get slowed down. I've hit many a rocks at probably hundreds of rocks with a differential at 2 or 3 miles an hour and did no damage, or a half a mile an hour. And I also have hit rocks at 30 or 40 miles an hour. In fact, a friend of mine hit one about 60 and completely bent the rear end right in half. So something to be aware of. These are what we call penalty markers in off-road racing, and I'll guarantee you this one will give you flat. It's more important to hit it with the face of the tire, the tread part of the tire, than the sidewall. The sidewall is typically the weakest part of the tire. It needs to flex, and the strongest part of the tire is the face here. This is definitely the way to not hit the rock. You can get slowed down. You're going to hit the rock, relax the vehicle so you have more suspension, and hit the rock with the face of the tire. It's going to be the best way to do it. You should be able to go out and practice four-wheeling and knowing exactly where all four wheels are. In other words, you should be able to say, there's the road, there's a piece of a rock sticking up. I'm going to see how close I can put my left front tire to that rock. Or for sure be able to drive it there and make the right front tire go over right directly over the center of the rock at slow speeds. Believe me, whenever you get out rock crawling, you're going to want to know exactly where each one of those tires are. Well, we brought Rene Villeneuve up here to this beautiful canyon and kind of show him a little bit about rock crawling. A lot of times it's helpful to bring a second person or a second vehicle again to kind of guide us over these rocks.
So Ivan, we've come up the canyon this far. Now we've got a few obstacles to climb. What do you think we should do?
Now we got two options if you look. We can go up to the right and straddle the water, or we can go to the left. And I think it'd be better, my opinion would be go straddle the water because we don't want to slide into those rocks where it's kind of wet there. So I think we'll go and I'll get you up on top and then guide me up there also. I use my left foot on the brake doing this type of driving, but just keeping momentum, keeping the tires turning and kind of feeling your way up the hill. It's as if you're kind of crawling by hand over the rocks.
Well, Ivan, what do you think we should do about this one?
Well, I think if we get you up on top and watch me, we can get right up without any problem. The thing we want to be aware of is the fact that if we go up to the left of the water, that we could slide into those rocks and possibly damage a wheel. So I think we just straddle the water and I believe that this vehicle just walk right up there. The guys that do a lot of rock crawling are real good at keeping momentum, but yet barely keeping a little bit of brake pressure. I use my left foot on the brake and then a little bit of throttle, just kind of feeling your way over the rocks as if you were actually crawling. The rule of thumb is, typically around rocks, is absolutely go slow. It doesn't take a lot of speed, as you can see, and these vehicles will climb pretty incredible, rocky, gnarly terrain. But The ultimate goal in four-wheeling or driving Indy cars or off-road race cars or probably flying an airplane is getting that real feel where you have a real sense of what's going on and a real understanding. What's hurting the vehicle, what's not hurting the vehicle, what's full adhesion, what isn't full adhesion. Know when you're giving the vehicle too much throttle, not enough throttle, too much brake, or not enough brake. And it's a feel, and it comes with practice. If you have to cross water, go ahead and get across the water, the stream. Before you actually cross the water, it's not a bad idea to get out and take a stick or walk out and see how deep the water is, making sure that you're not falling into something much deeper than you think it is. Depending on how deep it is or how dirty it is, there could be a log or a huge boulder that you can't see that could be submerged. Got myself in a situation, a lot of other people have too, where they've gone into the water without really checking how deep the water is and not realizing it can be 5 foot deep. Another thing to think about, realizing that when you do cross water and the water gets up in the brakes, is the odds are that on the other side of the stream you're not going to have any brakes for a while. What we do is, after crossing the water, is ride the brake with 1 foot until you've got the brakes hot again and you got brakes back.
Only 2% of the desert is water, contains water, has water in it. So washes, and especially where there's free-flowing water, are very critical parts of the environment. That's where you're going to find the most wildlife and species and what have you. So we need to be respectful. We should try to limit our amount of time that we're actually spending in those areas.
If you have the option to go around the water, go around. If you get out into water and you're out there for any length of time, that it can get into the differential, it can get into the wheel bearings. I had a situation in Mexico one time where I was stuck in the tide for 3 or 4 hours and I had to replace wheel bearings and bearings in the rear end and all these things. It can be very expensive when you start playing in water. You know, if you're going to four-wheel year-round, the odds are there are going to be time when you get out in the mud. Kind of a different technique to get through the mud. You need, instead of the flotation we talked about in sand, now you need something that's a narrow tire with a lot of tire pressure to cut through the mud that's going to get you down to the hard, packed, whatever's underneath there, providing there's something down there that the tires can get a hold of. If you don't want to over-rev the engine and overspin the tires, or underspin the tires where you're actually bogging the engine down, a lot of times turning the steering wheel back and forth will modulate the front tires and get you some traction to move forward. Drive right in somebody else's tire patches so you can get down to that hard piece of ground quicker. If it's racing or if it's a matter of just getting from point A to B, or you're out four-wheeling, you want somebody else to do the majority of the work and let you get down to that hard ground. The whole key to driving in mud or any of the surfaces we're talking about is maintaining the maximum amount of adhesion that you can with the vehicle you're in the kind of conditions you're driving. Now, we really need to match the RPM with the wheel speed and get that real feel for the maximum amount of adhesion is for that particular surface. Just remember that you don't have a lot of car control, very slick. If it's muddy, the odds are there could be mud holes or water holes that you can slide into.
We were visiting at your neighbor's house. You would leave trash in the yard or in the living room. You don't want to do that here in the outback as well. The idea is to leave no trace. The beautiful backcountry, that's why we all want to go. That's what we enjoy about it. If we are careful and respectful, we can be there and not leave a trace, and it'll be there again for us and our children to come to later.
We hope you found the video very informative and fun. Several things we want you to remember. Always be prepared, remember your limitations, your vehicle limitations, and be safe.